welcome to Premier 005 of the Introduction to Meditation and Introduction to the Internal Map of Reality. Today is Wednesday, the 23rd of February, and we have in store for you tonight a good selection. We've been following a pretty set pattern agenda, so we're not going to vary from it too much, but there are some new things in there. We'll do our 1-minute meditation, which is a preparation for you doing longer meditations, and it's an attempt to build a habit. So we all now should have a good memory recall frame of sitting still for 1 minute, which can be extended to as long as you want to sit. We're going to continue on with part 3 of our left-right brain balance. And then in that section, we'll be looking at balancing our energies some more. And it follows along the 3-body centering approach, where you'll be balancing your physical, your energy system, and your spirit. I decided to go back to the color meditation, the guided meditation for the walk through the rainbow. And we'll give the walking through the body one a break. We'll come back to that maybe in a couple sessions. Following the color meditation, we'll do the filters part 2. It's a continuation of understanding filters, which are the processes that eliminate or distort or generalize your input before you actually are conscious of it. So this is an automatic feature that you can learn to become aware of and manage. And we'll look at exercise 7, observing your filters. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a bonus topic, a discussion of a special filter, the time filter. So relax and enjoy this next segment, which is the 1-minute meditation. And then we'll continue on with the rest of tonight's program. Hello, and welcome to the continuation of session 4 of the Introduction to Meditation, Left-Right Brain Balance. And so we're going on with part 3, which is going to look now at using spirit, your spirit balance. So let's go over to the PowerPoint, and we'd like to talk about something called a cybernetic loop. And this is a process where your subconscious will constantly loop you through things. In our last session, we talked about scripts that people run. So under the internal map reality, there are many things that the subconscious does in the background and automatically. And one of the things that we've been talking about is the association of your day-to-day beliefs in terms of what you think you need to do to satisfy your desires. Now here I use the word value, but a value is something that is important to you, i.e. a desire. So the word value and desire can be synonymous. So what is important to you? What do you desire? Whatever it is that you desire or whatever is important to you, you would develop beliefs or strategies to satisfy those values, to satisfy those desires. Now, if the beliefs are really resourceful, then your outcomes will get you what you want. You'll get mental states and behaviors and things will happen that really are in line. And when you look at the results, when the results come back and you look at them, they will match up. However, there is the opportunity that when it comes back, that's not close. So you will go back through and adjust your beliefs or generate more beliefs if you are not satisfied. So this is a loop, and this continually happens. So you are subconsciously always evaluating moment to moment, are you getting the results you want for your values or for your desires? Are your beliefs manifesting your outcomes? So this is the cybernetic loop. Now, what's interesting about this cybernetic loop is that I believe that this is what happens when you meditate. When you sit down to meditate and you're just sitting there quietly, the system, your whole self will immediately begin to evaluating from the micro up to the macro for everything about you. And it does this in a self-regulating kind of way. Now, there's an analogy here to something called fractals. And those of you who may not have heard about a fractal, but this is something that was discovered in the 50s and 60s, that if you have a simple quadratic equation, and if you feed the results back into itself, i.e. the result being z is the square plus c, and if you keep changing c and feeding it back into the equation, in this case, they're feeding z back into the equation and squaring it, what will happen is that you'll end up getting a feedback loop. These feedback loops end up being extremely interesting, and they can produce rather fantastic results. So here's an example of a fractal, and it generates these elaborate drawings. Now they use fractal equations like this to draw clouds and to draw seacoasts, and they are integrated into many computer animation programs. But as I'm suggested in the previous moment ago, that when you meditate, you are actually doing feedback. And there was a process that was popular for a while there called biofeedback. So when you meditate, you're giving feedback to yourself. And here's an example of a group. These are the kids I had in my creative dance group, and they're doing a little project on their own. They're doing a little improv in which they're interacting with themselves. And you'll see my little friend boy up there in the top left. He's the one that had the breakthrough and began to find out how he can more resourcefully interact with a group. He had a tremendous breakthrough. And the young lady there on the top right, very shy, but she was able to work by herself very effectively. And the two on the bottom left, Julie and her friend there, I forget her name now, were always able to relate to people, always interacting. In fact, I had to stop them from interacting to get them to work by themselves. But the point here is that they were doing a make-believe movement, and they were interacting not with anything real, but just interacting with themselves. And they were able to generate some of the most beautiful little dance pieces, and all they would need is just a little bit of information, maybe some music, and seed them with an idea, concept, and then they would grow that into a dance and movement. So this is what I'm suggesting, that when you're now doing your meditation and you're sitting quietly, that you practice the art of doing nothing. You focus gently on something inanimate that has no particular meaning, neither a spot in front of you or that fuzzy dot. And as you're focusing gently on this fuzzy dot with your eyes closed, or the spot on the wall, or whatever it is you've decided to look at, you will get distracted. So you just bring yourself back to focusing gently. And you're not really doing anything, are you? You're not trying to change the dot. You're not trying to analyze the dot. You're just sitting there quietly. But something amazing happens when you're doing this. This feedback process, you can almost feel it building. And the longer you sit and the quieter you are, right? If you shut down your internal dialogue by focusing, okay, let's talk about that. How do you shut down your internal dialogue? By focusing on something inanimate like that dot on the wall. So your internal dialogue is, in fact, a thought that's distracting you. Now, a lot of people have this problem, and I get this a lot. So this really is only a matter of practice. The more you practice disconnecting from the chatter, right, politely and gently, and going back to focusing on something inanimate, right, the more you can get a longer period of quietness. And it will happen all of a sudden. You're this busy, there's all these thoughts hitting you, and you keep disconnecting, going back to your fuzzy dot or your dot on the wall, and then all of a sudden, it settles down. And we're going to talk about this later on in a couple of the other sessions in the internal map reality. There is a breakthrough. You practice, and you don't think you're getting anywhere, then all of a sudden you get this calm, right? And you are just a witness to what is going on. So I would encourage you to now do slightly longer meditations. In our next workshop, we're going to be talking about frequencies of the brain, and this is where you will learn what happens to the brain as you meditate for longer and longer periods. What happens to the frequency of the brain? Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this, and as usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me by my email anytime, and you have a great evening. Okay, it's time for our guided meditation. We're going to return back to the color meditation. And remember, you can do this one with your eyes open or your eyes closed. Just sit back and relax. Okay, with your eyes closed, sitting comfortably in a chair, we're going to start walking through the colors of the rainbow. And I'd like you to start with the color red. And just let whatever comes into your mind float in. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And just think about the color red. And if you want, you can imagine that when you breathe in, you're breathing in the color red and filling up with red. And when you exhale, you're letting the color red leave your body and go out back into the room. Red. Now we're going to move from red to orange. Just start thinking about the color orange, and whatever comes to your mind is right. And again, if you want, you can imagine that as you breathe in, you're breathing in the color orange, and as you exhale, you're letting the color orange come out and fill the room. And if you have a little bit of that red left, you can let that out too. Orange. Now we're going to move to yellow. Yellow. And just as before, there's no right or wrong way. Whatever comes to your mind about yellow is right. And if you want, you can imagine that you're breathing in the color yellow, filling up with it, taking as much as you want because it's free. And as you exhale, you can let out the color yellow into the room. And if there's any orange left, you can let that out too. Yellow. We're going to keep moving now to green, brilliant green. And you can pretend that you're breathing in the color green and filling up with it, brilliant green, and letting it exhale out as you breathe out. And again, if there's any of that yellow left, you can let that out as you breathe out. We'll move now to blue. We'll move from green to blue. And if you want, you can breathe in, fill up with blue, and as you exhale, you can just let it come out and fill the room with blue. And as before, if there's any of the green left, you can let that out too. Blue. We'll keep moving now across the rainbow to purple, deep purple. And just let whatever comes to your mind about purple float in. And again, if you want, you can pretend you're breathing in the color purple and breathing it out as you exhale. Letting out any of the blue that might be left. Finally, we'll move to violet. Violet's almost like seashells, like mother of pearl. And you can imagine you're breathing in fresh violet, filling up with that color and letting it leave your body as you exhale. And of course, if there's any purple, you can let that out too. Violet. And to finish up this little guided meditation, we're going to combine all the colors together and create a brilliant white light. Brilliant white light. All the colors together balanced. And you can pretend you're breathing in this brilliant white light, filling up with it, and exhaling it out as you breathe out, filling up the room with this brilliant, clear, bright, white light. And at any point, you feel you want to open your eyes and come back, you can. Hello and welcome to Internal Map of Reality, Session 4, Part 2, Filters. We're going to be moving on, looking at examples of filters. In the Part 1, we just looked at a general description of what the filters are and how they function. But now we're going to actually look at some real-life filters. Now, filters are, I would say, a major part of your internal map of reality. And as I've been saying all along, and it probably deserves to be repeated, is that everything that you do in your day-to-day, moment-to-moment existence is in some way indicated in your map. Now, this is true for the great majority of people. They function almost automatically depending on the map. Now, there are people like yourselves who are studying about the internal workings of their map and are building the ability to function above or with, and in some cases without, their internal map of reality. So perhaps our ultimate goal here in this course is to get you to the point where you're not just aware of your map, but you can live with it and begin to use the power of your internal map. And hopefully with practice, you can develop the skills to live without depending on your map. You can be map independent. So let's look at some specific filters. And here's one that I will be mentioning several times, and it's your timeline, the way you filter your perception of time. And I'll do some bonus content on this. But let's look at one aspect of your timeline filter. It's called your direction finder. Now, with this aspect of your timeline, you are going to be looking at the future to determine what direction you make or what decisions you make. Or you might be someone who looks to your past. Are you someone who drives their car by looking in the rear view mirror a lot or all the time? Well, you can imagine what that's like if you're in a car with someone and the person who's driving is constantly looking in their rear view mirror, like a lot. You might begin to get nervous, like what the heck are they looking at? It's good to look occasionally at what's behind you, but you probably want someone who's looking ahead of the car in front. So this direction filter, a big part of it is identifying whether you are a person who's driving their car, their life, their map, based on what they have seen or have done in the past? Or are you a person who is looking towards the future and aiming their life towards what they want? Now, this is kind of important because there are pluses and minuses to both approach. If you're a person who's constantly looking at the future in terms of assessing how they are doing, well, you might run into this common problem. If you're looking at an object, say the mountains, and you're driving along the prairies, and you're trying to assess your progress by the horizon, well, the horizon is always in front of you. You will never, ever reach the horizon. So some people get frustrated with their life goals if they're constantly looking at the future and trying to measure the progress towards something off in the distance. Conversely, those people who are constantly looking at the past might easily get misdirected. You cannot drive and stay on the road by looking at the past. You might lose your direction if you're constantly focused on what has happened in the past, both negative and positive. This is not a negative or positive type of thing. It's basically you need to be able to look to the past to see how you've progressed, and you need to look to the future to see where you need to correct and adjust and aim. Think of an airplane pilot. They are constantly correcting the plane up and down and to the left and back and side in all four dimensions of their traveling, of how they can position the airplane. They don't just lock it in one position, they're constantly adjusting it. Similarly, if you think of someone driving a bicycle, they learn the art of adjusting. Now, the key to being able to adjust is whether or not you are aware of what's happening in the future. So one aspect of the timeline is identify whether you are fixated on the future or whether you're fixated on the past. One interesting little thing that we can do is I usually get people to point in the direction that they think the future is. Point to where they think the future is and point to where they think the past is. Do you think the future is in front of you and the past is behind you? Or do you think your future is to your right and the past is to the left? Or is it reversed? Do you think your past is on the right and your future is on the left? I've had people who thought their future was really an up arrow towards the sky that pointed up. And I said, point to your future, and they pointed up, which is, that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with the direction that you think your future is, but it does have an impact on how you're processing your map. And this will be a good bonus topic to talk about that. So right now, you point to where you think your future is. Again, there's no right or wrong with this. It's just what you think. Do you think your future is dead ahead in front of you, or do you think it's to one side or behind you? That obviously indicates where you think your past is. So if you think your future is to your right, you automatically think your past is to your left. You think your future is to the front, you think your past is to the back. Now, you might think your future is behind you. Well, I haven't really run into that too often. But here's another example of how this can work out. If you think your future is in front of you, it's like you're sitting in a car driving, isn't it? It's like you're looking ahead and you're driving the car towards your future, right? Or if you think your future is towards your left or to your right, it's like you're looking at it on a widescreen projection. Your future is a timeline in front of you that you can look at and evaluate. Now, these two approaches have an impact on how you process information. And we'll be going into this later. But for the time being, figure out for you, where is the future? In front of you, or to your left or right, or actually up above you? Now, just to wrap up this thing on the timeline for now, we want to identify your orientation, and this affects how you plan things. So if you're oriented to be looking ahead of you to the future rather than behind you to the past, this will affect how you set your goals and how you do your planning. You probably heard people in sessions or meetings, or you may even be the type of person who says, well, let's do this such that this does not happen again. Okay? They want to make preparations so things don't happen like they did in the past. Or you might be the type of person or know people who say, listen, if we want to get to this skill level, or we want to be able to accomplish this in the future, these are the things we need to do today to be able to do that tomorrow. Okay? Think about it, and let's move on. Now here's one, the associated filter. We've talked about this a little bit, looking at this. When you are associated, you are in the crowd. You're like one of those people in that group. When you're disassociated, you're looking at it from a distance, and you're like in the helicopter looking down. This is a measure of how important something is to you. So when you're listening to someone talk and they're describing something that they're doing or will do or have done, do they describe it such that they are associated, closely attached to it, or are they describing it as if they're looking at it from a distance? This distance is associated with whether or not you are emotionally involved in the content. Okay. There's some other aspects of associated, dissociated when it comes to processing information. Some people will process information such that it's just data. It has no more significance than, a number. Other people will process information in the reality such that they feel compelled to act on it. So information can be just data, or information can be a call to action. This is directly related to how associated you are with the information you're receiving. So as input comes into your reality, if you're very associated, you may actually begin to act on it immediately. If you're disassociated, you may only just observe and record the information and not necessarily act. Here's another one which we see in our lives, the frequency filter. And there's a lot of different dimensions to the frequency filter. So people will repeat things at some frequency level. Maybe they may only repeat something seldom, once in a blue moon. Or they might repeat something frequently to the point where they will do it automatically prior to doing anything. And I think about my mother, that before she went and did anything of any significance, there was a certain posture, there was a certain phrase, there was a certain kind of little routine she did automatically before she did anything of any level of importance. Another example that's coming to my mind is a baseball pitcher. So if you watch a pitcher, they will do something repeatedly the same way every time they throw a pitch, unless it's not an important pitch. If they're just, casually throwing something to the first baseman or throwing something back to the catcher, they may not do their ritual. But if it's an important pitch, if it's a money pitch, they will summon up their ritual and they'll do it every time. Some people become compulsive about their rituals. The classic one is the obsessive compulsive behavior of washing hands. And today, with the foolishness that's going on, people have become obsessed with cleanliness and washing hands and cleaning and scrubbing things. And to the point that it can become a detriment. There are specific oils and protection on your skin. There's antibodies, there's protection, oils and antibodies that protect you from invasion on your skin. If you wash them off, then you no longer have those oils, you no longer have those antibodies. So frequency can be a matter of whether you do something on a ritualistic basis or seldom. This is very important to notice in terms of your perception of how powerful it is. There's another dimension to the frequency filter. You may notice that some people need to be convinced of something several times, and typically it will be a number of times. You might know someone that you have to tell them something 3 or 4 times in different ways before they go, oh, okay, I'll do it. Some people, you just need to say, I think it'd be really great if we did X, Y, and Z. And they'll look at you and go, oh, yeah, that is great. Let's do it. They don't need to have a set number of influential statements to act. So again, in dealing with whether or not you act on something or whether or not you just treat it as data and leave it untouched or unaction, if you're motivated to act, it may be that you haven't had the convincer enough times to act. Let's look at another example of this. Say you're a salesperson and you're trying to convince someone to buy an item. Now, assuming that you can see them live and in person, you would be really a much better salesman if you could determine whether they have a frequency filter and how many times they need to hear something before they act. And how would you do that? Well, you might try them with something very, 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 very simple and to see how many times you have to repeat it before they go and actually do it. Now, a really good salesman will ask a person questions and will ask them certain things and will observe whether or not they have to be asked once, twice, 3 times. Some people have to be asked 4 times. Okay? The typical, though, is 2 or 3. And if you find someone that is a 2 or 3 convincer, they need to be convinced 2 times or 3 times, that's your clue. 1 time isn't going to do it. 2 times isn't going to do it, but that 3rd will. There's some other dimensions in here, but I think it's important. Now, with this frequency one, let's go back to the baseball pitcher. These frequencies, these rituals and repeated behaviors are important to the individual. If you change or make it difficult for the person to do their rituals, you may cause them some issues, okay? Think about it, and let's leave that one for now, but this is a quite diverse and interesting filter. Here's one that we can observe quite easily, the solution finder. Are you a type of person who finds solutions? Or are you the type of person who finds problems? You might be a helper. You might be the type of person who will, wherever they are, they'll identify the problem and say, oh, that's going to be a problem because this, that, and the other thing, constantly, and, really trying to help. Or you could be the type of helper who will find solutions. You may constantly saying, well, if you did this, you'll be able to get it. Or, the person who's always has their hand up, I want to do this. Now, the problem finder portion of this solution filter can be associated with procrastination. So people who find problems typically will find reasons not to do something. Okay? But this can also work with people who are the solution side of it. They will find a solution as if, well, it's already been done. Oh, that's already happened. And again, it becomes a way of procrastinating. It becomes an obstruction. So what we'll want to do with this filter, the solution filter, is identify how we use it, identify how we use all the filters, but this one in particular, because if you are trying to achieve something particular in your life, well then, which way would it be best that you're looking and filtering your reality? Are you filtering out the solutions and only seeing the problems? Or are you filtering out the problems and only seeing the solutions? You probably might be more skillful if you can flip back and forth. And this is a little creative game that you can do on your own. You can go and spend a few minutes and identify all the problems with something. Say there's something you want to do. Identify all the problems. What are all the reasons this can't happen? Identify them all. Then flip it and become the solution finder and find out all the ways that you can make this happen. So you can have fun with this filter, and again, this is one that's easy to observe. So that's the exercise 8 that I want you to work on. And again, I'll try to get out a small video on it to focus more on it. But pick one of these filters, or find one that you can design on your own, and try to identify in yourself how you use these different filters. Okay? Or you can look at people and see if you can see people using these different filters. Look for someone who's using the solution filter. Look for someone who's using the timeline filter. Look for someone using the disassociated association filter. Okay? Look for these filters in your day-to-day. Well, that's it for section 2. We're going to go on for section 3 and then looking at how to activate these filters to your advantage, how to spruce up filters and take a filter that may be lackluster and spiff it up and make it a power filter. We're doing that in part 3. So thank you for participating and being here in part 2, and we'll see you in the next session. And hello and welcome to this short video about your internal map of reality session exercise EX007. So this is exercise 7 in a series, and we'll be looking at filters. So one of the things that we are very, very interested in when we look at filters is we want to understand what they do. So their main role is to delete input. So you are bombarded with unbelievable amount of information on a moment-to-moment basis, of which you need to be able to focus. So your subconscious will delete most of the information that's around you, and you actually are conscious of very, very little. What's remaining is then likely to be distorted depending on the filters you have activated, and then probably generalized. So when something is distilled and you get rid of all of the unrelated information and it's been adjusted to match your beliefs in the world and then generalized, then that allows you to make quick decisions, right? The problem is that sometimes your decisions are not always that resourceful. So this exercise, what we want to do is we want to begin just becoming observant to look for filters around you, in you. I want you to just make notes about your own behavior of your family and friends. So here's another model that's quite similar to what we've been talking about. It's called the NLP, the Neuro Linguistic Programming Model. And they use very similar language. They talk about events from the external world. We call that input. And you are perceived, and they talk about the 5 senses. We talk about 6. That's okay. It's just information. Then it is filtered, and they recognize the same process of generalization, deleting, and distorting that we do. Then it is stored as an internal representation. The distorted, distilled version of your experience is what is then matched up with either a new or an existing previous internal representation. And that sets your mental state, and it sets your physiology, your behavior, and you get some kind of behavior. So this is what we're looking for. So what you're looking for is when you're observing yourself or observing people, you want to look at what information is coming into that person or yourself and whether or not it has in some way been generalized, deleted, or distorted. Here's an example when you're doing your observations in day-to-day ads. So on the left, you see an ad for a bottle of gin, and you see a glass. What you may not notice is the words sex in the glass of drink. On the right-hand side, they've highlighted the words sex so that you can see it. This is called subliminal advertising. It's generally frowned upon, but it was extremely popular. And I think to some extent it's still being used today. They're just getting better at hiding it. Why does it work? Because if you're expecting to see a bottle of alcohol and a glass with ice cubes and a drink in it, you're not looking for words, not looking for letters. So those letters, those words, sex, don't jump into the forefront. They stay in the background. Here's another example, just looking at people around you, body language. Now, if you looking at this person on the left here, this lady, if you really want to establish a rapport with this person, you might delete the fact that they're actually blocking you. They got their legs crossed and their arms crossed, which is a blocking indication that they're not accepting your input. They're blocking you. Similarly with these two gentlemen here, they may think they're communicating, but if their posture, even though they're mirroring each other, which is a form of communication, they are actually blocking each other. Then on the far right, you see people, 2 men talking there with their feet apart. their hands apart, and they're facing each other relatively directly, although one of them is slightly turned. This is a really positive indicator. Now, all of these body language symbols, you may not even notice. They may be deleted from your awareness. So what I'd like you to do is take off your glasses, look at the way people are communicating, look at the information that's being beamed at you in magazines and on the internet, right? And see if there's things in there that you would normally just delete or distort or generalize, that when you look at them closer, they have a deeper meaning. Well, that's all I want you to do for exercise 7, is just start observing and looking for filters. We will go deeper into filters in our next session, but spend some time, and whenever you're out and about, or even if you're watching TV or watching a movie, look to see if there's signs that say if it's a movie, that the producer assumed that you weren't going to catch the underlying message. You were just going to observe the generalized message. Well, take a crack at it, and we'll have a chat about it in our Sunday session. Hello, and welcome to bonus topic number 7. We're going to be going into something that I call time filters. Now, we've started talking about filters in our internal map of reality sessions, and I thought it would be appropriate to have a little bonus topic about some various aspects about filters. Now, when we are looking at filters, in particular this one that I'm interested in sharing with you, called the time filter, we have to understand how the subconscious treats time. Time for the subconscious realm is different than it is for our day-to-day conscious activities. So we'll talk about that. And so here's some aspects of the time filtering process that we have that I think is interesting. Something called the direction finder, how you orient yourself to your timeline. The frequency counter. We're counting our activities and then connecting it to the frequency of events similar to it on our timeline. What's possible and impossible. We determine what's possible in our reality based on the outcome or lack of outcomes in our timeline. And then finally, I'm going to talk about something that I call a root cause event. And I personally believe, and there's lots of research to support this, that any issues we might have in our current reality, in our current day-to-day, stem from a specific event in the past, a root cause event, that since that time you changed, something happened in your past that created such an impact that from that point on you were different. It caused a transformation inside of you, and you reacted differently. Sometimes some of these transformations are good and resourceful. We're interested in the transformations from root cause events that are in fact unresourceful and that may be limiting you in your ability to get what you want on a day-to-day basis. So we'll look at root cause events. The bottom line here is that if there was some magical way of healing that root cause event from the past, then you in the present will be healed. And it's only by healing that event from the past that you can heal yourself today. So let's go into it. So as we've been talking before, our conscious mind is really only 10% of our realm, and that the subconscious does a whole whack of things that we just don't have the time to do. We're busy. And in the conscious realm, if you see at the top up here, they talk, and I kind of agree with this in this slide, that willpower is something of the conscious mind, that you will things to happen and your subconscious participates. But then look at the next three: long-term memory, logical thinking, and critical thinking. All three of those are connected to your timeline, right? Your memory is in your timeline. Your logical thinking can only happen when you compare things to when things should happen, and your critical thinking. So it's all very much a time, present, past, and future relationship. However, your subconscious doesn't work that way. Your subconscious only looks at cause and events. So when a frame, we'll go back to frames now, when a memory frame is recalled, your subconscious treats it the same whether it is something happening in the past, currently in the present, or projected to the future. Your subconscious treats all frames equally. So in essence, your subconscious doesn't parse out time in the same way as we do on our day-to-day conscious level. And this is important because those of you who do have root cause events that were traumatic in the past, they hurt as much today as they did in the past, and maybe even more. Okay, so let's look at the direction finder. So what I'd like you to do, if you are interested in participating, is to orient yourself towards the future. For you, where is the future? Is it something straight ahead of you? Is it to your left? Or is it to your right? What direction is your future? And this makes a difference. And we'll be talking about this quite a bit in some of our other sessions. But let's just put it this way for this particular discussion. If you are someone who has pointed straight ahead, that makes you a very direct, goal-oriented person, doesn't it? If you are a person who saw your past or your future either to your right or to your left, this makes you a more of a pensive, thoughtful person. So you're going to look at your timeline as if it's laid out in front of you on a screen or on a table, and you're going to assess your whole timeline before you make a decision. So this kind of effect on the way that you process information is directly related to how you see, how you oriented your direction. And there's other things in here, but I think that's one to just get started with. Figure out for yourself which way, which direction do you think the future is. Now, remember, there's no right or wrong, and you can change these for specific effects. Let's look at this one, a frequency counter. Now, this is one that has a couple of different uses. If something has happened 0 times, has never happened in your past, so you look at something and it has never happened before, that has a very special meaning. And people who are faced with a frequency of 0 when they're making up their minds to do something will react in one of two main ways. One, if it has never happened, if it's a 0, they may decide that they want to do it. Wow, I've never done that before. I really want to do that, and get excited and motivated to do something that has a frequency counter of 0. There are others that when they see a frequency counter of 0, they say, no, I don't think I can do that. I've never done that before. So this is very important to know if you are a never do it again, or have never done it and want to do it, or have never done it and will never do it. Which type are you? And this can be flipped. You can flip this around for your various effect. The number 1 is a very interesting one. So if someone sees that an event has happened once before, Again, there's at least two possible ways this person can react. And this will be consistent. This is the way they will react most times to the number 1 event counter. They may say, oh, I've done that before. I am not going to do it again. So there are those people who will only do something once. So once they hit a counter of 1, that's it. They won't, or they don't want to, or they resist, or make a fuss. And there are others that say, oh, a 1, I've done that before. Let's do it again. That was whatever. Let's see if I can improve it. Or it was fun. Whatever rationale they'll put when they see 1 counter for an event, they'll be more motivated to do it again versus those that see a 1. It's like those people who never want to watch the same movie again. And me, I can watch the same movie over and over. Then the number 2 and more is a very interesting one. When it's a number 2 or more, these people will either become more committed or less committed. So some people, the more often they do something, it has a reverse effect in making them not want to do it anymore. They become more and more resistant. Now, there's another way this frequency counter works. Sometimes for people, they need to hear something or be asked to do something a certain number of times. Some people will do something on the first frequency counter, but some need to hear it twice, some 3, and possibly some 4. And the frequency counter, unless they have been talked to or suggested to 4 different times, they will not act. So this is like a convincer. How many times do you need to hear something before you're convinced to act? Now, here's the key. If you're working with someone or with yourself, and you ask them to do something very simple, note how many times you have to ask them. You might have to try a couple different things, like, oh, pass me the butter, and they don't do anything. You say, oh, I'd really like to get that butter. Still don't do anything. And you say, hey, Joe, please pass me the butter. And I go, oh, okay, I'm sorry, here. And they pass you the butter. Took 3 times. Now, here's the kicker. That's the way Joe will be most of the time, regardless of the immensity of the decision that they have to make, or no matter how trivial it is. Something as trivial as passing the butter, they had to be asked 3 times. Something as big as buying a house, they got to be convinced 3 times. Very powerful thing. So know where you are on this particular on your frequency counter. Now, there's different aspects of this, but those are a couple of the big ones. The number 0, the number 1, and the number 2 or more. Let's look at this other one in regards to time, and this has to do with sequencing and where you position yourself on the timeline. And this will, for some people, determine whether they think something is possible or they think something is impossible. You will look at yourself and you will say, oh, I can't do this because of where you are in the timeline. You may say, well, I am too young to do something, or I am too old to do something, right? And that will be possible or impossible. You might say, oh, because of my age, this is very appropriate for my age. I will do this. Now, this becomes even more and more significant as you age. You will tend to limit what is possible based on where you are in your timeline frequency, timeline range. So as you get older, you may find yourself limiting your possibilities. Okay, but it's purely something that you have put into your timeline. So here's the big one that I think we can do a lot of work with. Your root cause event. So in your timeline, there's an event that shaped you as you are today and will shape you as you will be tomorrow. So it has all the what, where's, when, why's, and who's, but more importantly, when. So when you go along your timeline, there will be a singular root cause event that may have been reinforced many times after, but there's a key one, that if you can neutralize that root cause event, it will take away the pain and suffering and limitations of all the following occurrences of that event, anything similar. So you might have an event in your past that limits you. Then as you go along in your current present state, you will match up anything that you're perceiving in your present future with the possibility of that event. If you get a match, then it will determine how you react. Now, again, as I said, if it's a very resourceful reaction, you become strong and you tackle the issues and you go forward, fantastic, leave it alone. But if it's a root cause event that causes you to have fear, anxiety, to limit yourself and to not go forward, if it becomes a very unresourceful effect of your root cause event, then you may want to look at it. Now, there are lots of therapies that involve actually reliving root cause events. The approach that I've kind of grown to doesn't do that. I'm not a proponent of reliving trauma. However, there is a way of releasing the trauma or releasing the energy associated with a root cause event without reliving it. And so this is what I call cleansing or clearing your timeline of all limiting root cause events. Okay, now I'll be honest with you, it does take work. It does take time. And in my last bonus topic, I talked about the fact that the more you practice, the more you do this, the better you get at it, and the more effective you become at cleaning your timeline. Very resourceful people spend a lot of time being resourceful, and they spend a lot of time at achieving their levels of success. They don't just sit home and wait for it. You've got to go and get it. So we'll be talking about this timeline meditation. It's a guided meditation to clean your timeline. Now, you will probably, if you choose to do this guided meditation with me, you'll probably enjoy it. But what I want you to be able to do is to do this meditation on your own and to make variations of it. And I'll give this little story. I was doing some work in a group home, and I was doing something like the timeline, not exactly, but kind of like it. And one of the young fellows said, "Oh, I've got one for you, Steve. Can I tell you my guided meditation?" And he told me a guided meditation that was fantastic, and I must try to replicate it. It's called Melting the Snowman. And the snowman was all of the things that limit you. The snowman was all of your pain. The snowman represented all the things that froze you. And then what he did in his guided meditation, which is rather beautiful, he melted the snowman slowly. And as the snowman melted, all of your tensions, all of your fears, all of your anxiety went away with the melting snow. Very beautiful guided meditation. So that's another example of working with an imagery to deal with a root cause event. But we'll get more into that later. So here's the thing. When you look at your timeline, there will be events. And so we have a way of traversing your timeline by utilizing your subconscious. You will get good at using your subconscious. You may not remember the details of your timeline, but your subconscious mind does. Your subconscious remembers all of the details, even though you may not remember. Now here's the trick of how this works. Your timeline is there all the way, and your subconscious knows it. Your subconscious may protect you from information that may harm or hurt you. So you may not be able to consciously see the information on your timeline, but your subconscious does. Your subconscious has said, oh, I don't want to show you this because it hurt you before and I don't want to hurt you again, so I'm going to make it invisible. I'm going to filter it. So your subconscious filters out painful content, but that painful content still affects you. So these root cause events, until healed, will affect you. You just can't see them. You can't see what's causing you to react the way you are, but it's still there. Okay, I hope you understood this. So bottom line, your subconscious can see your entire timeline. You consciously have a filtered version of your timeline. You tend to only see the parts of your timeline that are rosy, rose-colored glasses. Well, that's it for your quick little bonus topic. We obviously will be going into the time filter in great detail later on, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to share this with you to give you an idea of where we're going in the future with the timeline filter. Okay, that's it for today.